er enig. Jeg får også sige en ganske kort ting på dansk. Fordi der er mange, der er kommet her, alle unge deltagere, der er kommet hen til mig og sagt til mig, hvordan får vi færdig sin bog? Og nu er det gået op for mig, at unge mennesker ved ikke, der er noget, der hedder boghandler. Så mit svar er, gå til boghandler.
Addressing one problem I've experienced today is that pretty much we all clap like crazy when we like something. We're a closed circle of a kind. And the question to perhaps all of you is, how can we get these good stories out to larger and larger circles? I think back to the times when Danishwara and Niels grew up, when there was the Whole Earth catalog, published by Stuart Brown, who's on TEDCon, he's still working away. Then there was a magazine called Ramparts, which started originally with the Vietnam War and incredibly reliable. The New York Times started using it, it got bigger. And my favorite, Mad Magazine, which in its own way was able to reach the mind of a 7th grader with large issues. How can we take all these wonderful ideas and suggestions and reach circles that go beyond, that are larger, spreading rings of water, so to say?
Yeah, I'll just repeat briefly, how can we bring all this out to a larger audience? How can we read it in the Mad Magazine? Is that for all the panelists?
Yeah, perhaps you each have your own ideas, because I know with Charles' work, it's probably reaching not a limited, but a certain kind of segment. Danish Voda his, Olin his, and Niels his. How do we get that larger? How do we get the indigenous tribes involved, people?
Okay, we'll have an answer from each. Answer.
In English, please.
Altså, der er noget, jeg ikke har forstået. Jeg ved, der er noget, der hedder Facebook og Twitter.
You have to do it in English, sorry.
I have no knowledge about it really, but I've heard about something called Facebook and Twitter and all these kind of things. Can they not be used?
Yes.
Okay, Charles, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, new media and traditional media, I mean, we already know all that. I do think that we also need to examine the ways in which we try to change people's minds and understand that people don't change their beliefs usually based on rational arguments. They change their beliefs when they have an experience that doesn't fit into their old beliefs. And we can give people those kinds of experiences, sometimes by telling stories that illustrate a new possibility, sometimes by directly giving people an experience that doesn't fit. I mean, if ultimately the problem is consciousness, or the problem is the basic narratives and perceptions of the world, then we need to work at that level too. And we can all give people experiences that don't fit into the logic of separation, that don't fit into the view of the world that we're all these competing separate selves. Any experience of generosity or forgiveness, unconditional acceptance, all of these personal things, these are just as important and just as political as the big things. The signing of the petition. Here's something that we can do. There's a petition circulating to call upon the EU to implement a universal basic income, and so I think work on all levels is necessary.
And it's just outside the book.
And it's just outside the book.
Our world is changing quite rapidly, and as the world changes, people will find that whatever, let's say, the answers that they had to their story, as Charles says, their story doesn't no longer answers or satisfies them, so they're going to be looking for additional answers. But a lot of it depends upon also what we do to create a different story, rather create a different way of solving problems. This becomes news. When people are doing something different, other people they naturally want to hear about it, even if it's just an item of interest. And then they may store that away, and then later on, when their life changes, they may remember that and say, yeah, there's an idea.
Yes, I think the question you posed is a good one. I don't think there's one conclusive answer to that. I think there's a multitude of answers. I can say what I believe or how I try to work with it. I think it's very important that we try to connect to people's immediate perception of their problems. I think that's one of the reasons why why we've been so unsuccessful in mobilizing around this climate crisis is because still, for most people in our part of the world, this is still a very abstract crisis. Very few people have an immediate experience of something wrong. So I think we need to sort of tap into the worries and anxieties that ordinary people have. Like, for instance, people may have an anxiety about, am I going to lose my job? Can I pay my mortgage, for instance? And then we have to, this is one of the things that I also like about Charles's work, is that it actually provides some practical solutions. One of the things that I'm very engaged in at the moment is this idea of full reserve banking. And what I'm trying to do is to say, well, you worry about this, you worry about your rising debts, you worry about jobs, you worry about this. Look, here's a practical solution to that, so that you connect to. I don't think we should just discredit sort of ordinary people's immediate perception of the world. Say, oh, you're living in this is all wrong. Now we have this completely new paradigm. We need to connect these things, and I think that also goes insofar as we communicate with politicians. We also say, okay, so you worry about jobs, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about basic income or something like that? Yes.
Yes.
You said that competition had evolved in European society, right? And so,
Is this for Charles or?
well, but you just answered another question that competition was. You said it had evolved. Okay, and so I would like to ask, because in my view, competition fosters conditions that makes it profitable for me that my neighbor is performing worse. And that is done in many ways. Fraud and cartels and many ways of delusions of what is really happening. So I would like you to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You want to repeat the question?
Yeah. So she was talking about the negative effects of competition and you know, what is the place of competition when it makes my neighbor's misfortune my good fortune, right? Yeah, when I said yes is my answer before, I was going to say more, but everyone started laughing and it turned into a joke. But, so I looked like, how does an ecosystem work? There certainly is competition in an ecosystem, but it's happening within a framework of interconnectedness, synergy, and symbiosis. So I think our future society will be very much like an ecosystem. One way that I envision what competition could be is a process by which you become more clear on what your gifts really are. And a process by which you develop your gifts to the point where you feel comfortable to really give them to society. And so I think along those lines. But I think that the role of competition will be much less dominant than it is today. It'll be secondary, just like the role of money, the role of reason as opposed to heart-based knowledge, the role of linear thinking, the role of technological manipulation, like all of these things have their place. The role of words as opposed to song. All of these things have their place, but the problem today is that they've transcended their proper role and usurped the role of other ways of interaction, other ways of knowing, other ways of being.
I think we have a comment from Scott.
Sure. There's different considerations or different concepts of competition according to a person's consciousness. Perhaps in the mode of ignorance or tamagone, maybe competition to see who's going to be the biggest drug lord or warlord. In passion, who's going to have the best company, who's going to make the most profit. But there's also competition in goodness. For example, we have the historical, the Kakutil, I think that's how it's pronounced, the natives of Vancouver Island. They had the potlatch. And they would have a competition to see who could give the most away. So they would all work very hard for 3 months, 4 months, and then they'd have a competition. They'd all come together and give everybody whatever they produced, and then whoever gave the most away, they got the most honor. And they were held in the highest esteem. And whatever was left over, they would burn. And then again, they would set out to create a bunch of goods, everybody according to their own ability, and then they would have another potlatch and give it all away. So that's one expression of competition. But the competition in goodness would also be to see who can be the kindest, who can be the most generous, like that. So according to a person's consciousness, they can use competition, or they will use competition according to their own way of thinking.
I think Bill said something too.
Actually, I think this question is more complicated than that. Because in competition, there's a winner and a loser, or several losers. And just to take an example, one of my daughters was a very good runner, but she didn't want to win because somebody else would lose and then be sorry. So I think that peaceful competition, most people think is fine, but it is more complex than that, I think.
I'd like to add from the world of art that art could not exist without competition, and ancient Athens that we all admire so much was based on competition between the arts and the arts competing. That was what made the high level of art. So in art, you actually admire the winner and you mirror yourself in the winner, and you need the winner as an idol and as a master. So I think if you look at the world of art, that's a great way to use a competition because there's no losers.
I just would like to add something. Remember that all games have some kind of aspect of competition. If it's a game, if it's playful, there is nothing wrong with it.
We have one up there. Yes? Yeah. Oh, father of. Sorry.
Open question for all of you, so I don't know if some people will answer. In frustration of the people you have put in charge or have been born into having us representing us in parliament or what we call representative democracy, all the banks have all the powers. In frustration that they don't seem to have the goodwill of the people in mind, I have degraded myself to starting a party which only reason is to give the power back to the people. There's no other thing. I would like to hear your ideas or meanings if this could be a first step solution in getting some of these good ideas implemented into the system quite fast, instead of building it up smallly and hoping that the people we have full place in power will take the right decisions as we
That is a question I think we all want an answer for, but maybe we could make the rule that we try to address the question to each or to an individual one of the panelists, because otherwise it will take a long time and we'll only have few questions answered. Do you have anyone in favor down here to?
you're a very nice man, but I hope to see you very soon again. Charles, I don't know that he's
Yeah, I think that any real change is going to come as an expression of people power. And when that context of popular pressure emerges, then the elites might have the courage to do the things that they do not have the courage to do right now. One example, or one possibility that I think might really be what changes things, especially in the United States, but maybe here too, is a debt strike. Resistance against paying the debts. It's already kind of happening in Greece.
And now it's you, yeah, sorry.
We've been talking about money, and we've been talking about values. I would like Charles's contribution to what are the new ethics underlying all these ideas. I think we need to recognize people being moved by some inner ethical drive also, and I think we need to develop a new kind of ethical language about this.
This is a more complicated topic than I can deal with briefly. Yeah, she asked about ethics and the importance of a new ethical system that is aligned with what we've been talking about. I consider myself not to be an ethical person, in the sense that I don't make decisions based on some set of principles. To me, making decisions, the whole idea that the right way to make a decision is to kind of work it out mentally and then hold yourself to some standard. It doesn't really work for me, and I've been instead trying to choose based on my authentic desire. What do I really want and what really feels good to me? In the old story, that's very dangerous because what feels good to you, that's bad. You're this utility maximizing animal. But I find that when I really am honest with myself about what feels good, it happens to coincide with the very things that we want to uphold ethically. For example, to use money in the spirit of a gift, use time in the spirit of a gift, and so on.
Anyone who would like to short add on? No? This one here.
Yes, I have a quick question on the topic money. I think the solutions you're talking about are a little theoretical. What about doing something now and start a new society without money, ecological societies, and start it right here now to do something? Perhaps Niels, could you answer that?
I'm rather pragmatic in a way, but not all everybody thinks so. But I think it will be complicated. Money can be very useful, practical. So why should we get rid of it if we control it in a good way? I mean, just think about how we organize a lot of things without money. Not easy.
Yeah, I would tend to disagree with. I know what you're saying, but I would tend to disagree still with you're saying these solutions are very theoretical. But I think some of these solutions, it's already happening. Like this idea of negative interest. We've already had negative interest rates in Denmark. We had that half a year ago. And also another thing that I was, when Charles, when you gave your banana example and said, well, it's sort of artificial that we have money which is capable of sustaining this value. And I'm wondering now that you tend to say, well, the most secure asset in the whole world are American T-bonds, right? But it could be argued, well, maybe they're not does this debt become more and more? Maybe that's not, so maybe what you're arguing for is in fact already happening, and that we may very soon, or maybe that's already the case, there are no safe havens for where you can put your money. Gold isn't safe, T-bonds isn't safe. We have, in Denmark, we have this, or I think you have that in English as well. It's as good as money in the bank, which sort of means it's really, really safe, and it just doesn't hold anymore. So that was to say that I don't think these solutions are necessarily theoretical. I think it's just a matter of grabbing some tendencies that are already there and then just, exacerbating them and directing them into the direction that we would want.
Can't have a gift.
Yes, turn this off.
Can't have a gift. Well, let's say it's difficult to have a gift economy by yourself. How many of you want to have a gift economy? How many of you are willing to participate in a gift economy? See me afterwards.
Lots of female
Let me
voices.
just add also to the idea of practicality. Yeah, like a lot of the things that we've been talking about almost want to happen already. So I agree that it's very practical.
Yes, I think the discussion is moving towards some kind of transition that people can grab onto and take home. If we can put that into the questions also, what do we do from now? Because that's quite important. Until next conference, there's a girl up there.
It's Charles as well. How do you see the role of the cities in this context that we have been discussing? Because there is not really contact with nature. People are really far away from, from the source of the things they are buying, and the housing and the banking systems are also very, very strong in the city atmosphere. So, of course, there are many initiatives here and there, but like in the whole context of the city, I think we are still really far away. Maybe it is easier when one moves away to the countryside and tries to start an ecological community. But how do you see this transformation happening in the cities?
Yeah, there's something really beautiful about a city too. The archetype of the city where there's so much energy and diversity. But I think that in the future, the cities will fewer people will live in cities. New York City, in 1850 or 1830, had several million people, and it met all of its needs from within, 20 kilometers. Almost all of its needs for food.
Yes.
I'm a forester, and I hate the idea of all of you running out into my forest and pushing down all the trees. Scaring all the animals away. Half of population in the world is living in cities, and I would like them to stay there. Lie up in front of their computer, yes, in order to halven the population of people in the world.
Is that a question?
That's my hope. That's my hope. And if you want this to happen, if you want to have your apartment or your house for free, you just reduce the number of population, the number of people. Either by putting more into the same room, going back to your parents, and certainly reduce your consuming. because then the system will break down.
Thank you.
But don't ever, all of you, go out back into nature. Don't want to do that.
I'm pretty. At the risk of dominating too much, I really want to respond to some of what's behind that. I don't think that we need to expand the total of cultivated land. We need to farm in a different way. We could actually shrink the amount of cultivated land and expand the forests if we practice permaculture in the right way. I read an article by a guy who had a permaculture farm in California, and he produced a yield 8 times higher than, not the average, but 8 times higher than the Department of Agriculture said was possible. However, these agricultural techniques, even though they're much more efficient, they produce much more food per hectare. They produce a lot less per unit of labor, which means for them to work, many, many people have to go back to the land. Not half, but instead of 1% of the population being farmers as today, maybe 10 or 20% need to be farmers. So
Okay. Yes, it's you. Yes. Oh. That guy with, yeah. The violet guy, yes, please.
All right. In regards to your take on the self and other, there's something called the immune response system, and it's very violent against invaders who cause disequilibrium in the body. There's a cancer on this planet which is moved by jealousy and greed. Okay, and it's called, capitalism, especially the people who have a lot of it, concentrated. Okay, and they have very, very strong vested interests that are proprietary, and so on. And they have a lot of money, and they're not only going to give bananas out to people that have 1 billion euros, they're going to also give it to mercenaries. Okay, and they're going to do whatever they can do to protect this old narrative, which we also talk about. We are not only going to make a new narrative, we also have to work in the transition and to protect this. And this calls for a different, this aspect of tactics called anti-fascism. And I'd like to hear your take on that.
Okay, so first, I don't think that the problem is the greed of the people in charge. I think greed is a symptom of the perception of scarcity. Greed only makes sense if you are living in the perception of scarcity. If you're living in the perception of abundance, then why would you be greedy if there's bananas all over the floor, hanging from the trees everywhere, and I'm here with my pile, preventing anybody else, but there are bananas everywhere, then greed doesn't make sense. But we live in a system that you're calling capitalism that creates scarcity and therefore generates the response that we call greed. So while I agree that I can understand that why we would say that capitalism is a cancer on the planet, but I don't think that the fundamental problem